Sasha, and I'm an INTP. And in this video, I would like to talk about the topic of abstraction and the way it shows up given the nature of intuition in the NT and the NF. So first, I would like to say that the process of abstraction is greatly misunderstood by so many people, and I don't often find very good definitions for it, but I will first start by saying abstraction is the process of decontextualization and generalization of information, events, and objects. So, roughly, what that means is that when one abstracts something, anything really, some sort of noun, it pulls it out of its proper context, or the sensory perceptive background that it exists in that gives it some type of concretized meaning. And so to give sort of a more concrete example of what that would look like, you take a banana, you take an apple, you take an orange, and you take some grapes, and you ask, what do they all have in common? What is invariant and unchanging amongst the objects before you? And superficially, they all look different because they differ in size, shape, color, but if one just simply says that they're a specific part of the tree, which is the fruit or the fruit-bearing part of the tree or the sex organ of the tree, then one can make a single category for all of the objects and fit it under this category of fruit. And that would be the process of decontextualization and generalization. It's taking something out of its proper context, out of its sensory perception background, and asking the question of what's invariant or unchanging and consistent about a thing, and paying attention to that, essentially stripping away the superficial details and only holding on to the essential characteristics of a thing given any space and time, given in any environment or any nexus point or event. That's abstraction in a nutshell. And all intuitive types, whether it is extroverted intuition or introverted intuition, go through this process of abstraction. Even though extroverted intuition is obviously extroverted and introverted intuition is obviously introverted, they are doing essentially the same thing, and that thing would be asking what is invariant and unchanging amongst things and paying attention or honing in on what that is. Extroverted intuition does that across a multitude of platforms, events, or objects. Extroverted intuition essentially starts with what a thing is, or its essential characteristics, and sees and looks to see how those things map and branch out in the environment roughly. Extroverted intuition is concerned with functionality, really what a thing is and what it does, and it takes and pays attention to the essential characteristics and how they play out, and then it connects those things to other things that have the similar variety, and it spreads out in a tree-like manner, in a tree-like pattern. Many people say that extroverted intuition starts from the one and then goes to the many, but the one thing it starts with, it abstracts, it pulls out the essential characteristics to that, and then it matches and maps those essential characteristics onto other objects, and therefore creates a family, a classification, a taxonomy, and a genus for all of these essential characteristics diverging off to these very different points. So that's extroverted intuition. Introverted intuition, it seems reversed, but it is too doing the same thing. The only thing is it starts with all the differing divergent points, and it pulls out what the essential characteristics of those things are, and then colludes them or converges them to a single categorization or to a single item of interest or classification, and says that this thing is X, given all of the essential characteristics that are extant within these other sensory phenomena that is out in the world. So, though extroverted intuition and introverted intuition superficially seem to differ, they are in a sense the same function. They're doing the same process, just simply in reverse, though it looks like they produce just grossly different results, and it may just be because of the fact that I'm an INTP and I look to unify all knowledge to some respects, that I see them essentially as the same thing, but they are the same thing. And so abstraction is something that is present within all intuitive types, but I think the thing that's missed is that the sort of models and tools that arise out of the abstractions differ from the two different quadrants of intuitive thinkers. So NFs may have a hard time understanding NT's abstractions, and NTs may have a hard time in understanding NF's abstractions, because though we're both creating abstractions with our intuitive functions are either in service of or aided by a differing function, a feeling function, or a thinking function, which totally changes the media which is created and extant within a certain quadrant, given them being rationalist or idealist. And so I will say roughly here, it seems that NTs, we create thinking tools or schemata or models, but it seems whether you're talking about an INTJ or an ENTP or an INTP, we're all creating tools for thought, things that help us make decisions. Because what's oftentimes lost, and this is true for NFs too, what's often lost on sensor types and probably outside just really sensor types, because I think that most NTs and NFs, we can understand what one another is saying roughly, because we deal with abstractions in our language. But I think what's lost on many people is that they think, well, even some NFs, they look at the abstractions that NTs make and they think that they're rather vague or ambiguous. And the point of abstraction, either for whether it's the NT or the NF, is not vagueness, but rather clarity. It's something to say like this: you can look at reality and it's highly complex, and when you look at the sort of superficial elements to things and what objects actually appear like in the environment when they're contextualized and enmeshed within it, there's too much information screaming at you at one time to make heads or tails or really analyze the thing for what it specifically is. So what an NT does is they take the object, or they take the idea, they take the concept, they take the event, whatever they take it, whatever they're taking or their mind selecting, and they pull it out of the context so that they can really look at it and examine it to have the clearest picture that they possibly could have, given whatever their goal or their desire is with the information, or is with that item, that object, or that event. One can think about it like this: if you try to figure out where to go in a general region or location, and somebody handed you a photograph of a helicopter view of, say, Poland, and you had to figure out where you're trying to get in Poland, when you look at the trees and the mountains and all of the different geological structures and how they're so tightly packed together and they're enmeshed, it's really rather difficult to figure out where the city is in respect to this city, or where this mountain range starts and ends and begins. But if you make a map, and it's a decontextualization, it's a simplification of the actual literal structure, you can then look at the map and figure out where one should go. And that's what it seems like roughly INTJs and ENTJs do. They make an abstraction to determine what result they should take in the environment, but they're making the abstraction so that their decisions are much more clear, so that their decisions have much more potency and are sort of analogous to a bullseye, that they have a much clearer target in the understanding of just the literal direction and leaning and trends going on, so that they can make the most sound and precise and efficient decision possible. And in INTPs and ENTPs, we do the abstraction, we make models so that we can come to the most sound and clearest conclusions about reality, essentially. And we make the abstraction, and we do the process of abstraction for clarity, so that we can understand the world better and we can see it better than most types. It's the same for NFs, in which I feel I'll use a statement that I use in sort of saying the misrepresentation of my ideas, but it seems like a lot of times that what NFs say or they try to convey to people falls on deaf ears, because NFs, they do the same process of pulling out the essential characteristics to things. However, they're concerned with the sort of ethical and moral landscape of what those essential characteristics mean about reality, community, and their relationship to meaning, and they want to sort of tell why these essential characteristics are something that would be important to pay attention to. They want to show and to demonstrate to others what they see or what they've pulled from the environment. So they typically create metaphors and analogies or very elaborate and complex narratives to give the picture and the clarity that just may not be possible while a person is going through the situation. I think what abstraction allows us to do as individuals is create the necessary distance between us and an event, us and a person, us and their actions, us and just the immediacy of reality, to be able to block out the world and decontextualize things and pay attention to what's essential and unchanging across a multitude of platforms. That's just the most powerfulest tool we have in aiding us in making sort of the rational, logical, egalitarian, and correct moral choices. It seems to be the reason why in T's we can be extant in fields like science and engineering and have such palpable results, and why it seems like we can see things that other people can't see, because we can create this necessary distance with our ability to abstract things and pull them away from their current framework or how they're readily understood. And it seems that that's why NFs, they can just invoke just the most powerfulest social chains, or even, we can do interplay. Either of us could be social activists, either of us could be mathematicians or engineers, but it just seems that what allows us to create just the most potent results that seem to emerge throughout history because of our existence is our ability to decontextualize things. It is our ability to generalize things. It is our ability to look at something and ask, what's essential? What's unchanging? What's invariant? What is that thing that is essential to the makeup of whatever this is that I'm looking at, that I'm analyzing, that I'm thinking about, or that I feel something for? Paying attention to that and using that in our decision making, it's what gives us our superpowers, and that's essentially what intuition is. It's abstraction, and that's ultimately what abstraction is, and it's what determines the media that we make. I suppose I have a running hypothesis that goes a little like so. You take the 4 accuracy quadrants and you can attach some form of media to them. Maybe not stringently. You can't say all NTs are scientists or thinkers or philosophers or whatever, what have you, and you can't say all NFs are activists and writers and poets and metaphysicians and philosophers. You can't say that it's exactly like this, but it seems that mythology is something that emerged from the mind of the NF, that science is something that emerged from the mind of the NT. It seems that things as media, as we sort of know them and even resonate with them, are because of the sort of personalities that constructed it up. I mean, all knowledge, it starts from somewhere. I'm an epistemologist, I've said this before, and it seems like the knowledge structures that are extant within the world comes, to some extent, comes from all the personality types. And I would say that the type of media that NTs and NFs are able to create and make is wholly because of their ability to do abstraction. And it seems that abstraction is, if anything, the language of insight. And that's my video. Oh, and to say this, that it's not we don't make abstractions to be vague. We don't make abstractions to be pretentious. We don't make abstractions to do anything else other than to bring some birth to clarity in this amazingly confusing complex that is reality, and for the NFs to bring a light to humanity, which is wholly and reticently necessary because people just do things that are very morally opaque and ambiguous, and they bring the light, and they bring the light in that realm, and we bring the light in the other realm. It's in the other realm. Not that those two things are divergent or just mutually exclusive from one another, but I think that oftentimes the story of Prometheus, it's the story of rationals and NFs, and it is the light of abstraction that we bring to the world, and the thing that really typifies and differentiates us, and even makes a fraternity amongst the two. And so that's my video, NTs and NFs on abstraction. Thank you.